Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Epic Gangsta Tales. Today we got a very interesting topic and a very interesting character, to say the least. That being John Gotti's most trusted and feared hitman, Eddie Lino. Eddie Lino is an American Sicilian mobster in the Gambino crime family. He was born on April 12, 1942 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. The Lino name is a very recognized last name when it comes to the New York Mafia. Mafia royalty, if you will, Lino had two family members in a different crime family. That being Frank Curly Lino, a well-known established name in the Bonanno crime family. A lot of history there, tied in with Messino and, ultimately went down with that Messino ship as well. And the other being Robbie Lino, also of the Bonanno crime family. A serious guy. Frank Lino was known to be a hit guy, very tied in, very connected, serious earner. And Robbie Lino was more the wild card. He was more the trigger squeezer, and he also had his hands in Wall Street and a lot of those pump and dump stock fraud scams and stuff like that. But both men had serious reputations of their own and were both highly respected. Eddie Lino was a big-time drug dealer as well. And prior to him getting his button, his name was mixed in with some of the biggest names in the drug world, both in and out of the mafia. Names like Vic Amuso, Gaspipe Casso, Jerry Papa. All three of them were wise guys and moved a lot of drugs, that being heroin, cocaine, marijuana being the big ones. And it was in fact the stigma of being a big-time drug dealer that was the main reason that Paul Castellano would not give Lino his button. Eddie Lino would harbor a grudge against Big Paul Castellano, and Lino ultimately would get his chance to make Castellano regret not making him shortly down the line. Eddie Lino was a close friend and confidant of John Gotti Sr., a then captain in the Gambino crime family. As you well know, that Castellano, unlike wine, did not get better with time, and towards the end of his reign, he was making enemies left and right, both old and new. He hemmed himself into a tight spot, and even old friends and allies ultimately turned their back on Castellano. And John Gotti was at the top of the Paul's Gotta Go list. With the heat that came from John Gotti's Bergen crew with the drugs was intense, to say the least. Gene Gotti, Eddie Lino, John Carniglia, Angelo Ruggiero were all tied in with the drugs and the bullshit that came with it as a result of the Bergen crew's drug dealing. The FBI hung more wire on these guys than a fucking Christmas tree, to say the least. The most damning recordings came from the Ruggiero household. Angelo Ruggiero was recorded making drug deals, talking about Cosa Nostra business with, guys that weren't made. In fact, he was taped conversing with Eddie Lino, who at the time wasn't made, which is a big no-no. And, he also was recorded speaking about the commission, which, is essentially career suicide, if you think about it. And bad-mouthing Big Paul, just a complete mess, and most of it got lumped on to Ruggiero. But because of Ruggiero, the FBI then had the ability to bug and wire Big Paul's house, and we all know how that turned out, i.e. the commission trial. With all the bad blood in the crime family, at the time, John Gotti felt cornered. He was the captain of the Bergen crew, therefore he was responsible for those guys, both made and unmade, that were under him or part of his crew. So instead of waiting around to get whacked, Gotti put together the equivalent of basketball's dream team for hitmen. And of course, he would turn to Eddie Lino to help get the job done. That job being taking Paul Castellano off the board. John Gotti Frankie DeChico, and Sammy the Bull would run point on the Big Paul hit. Eddie Lino and John Carniglia were two of the four shooters on the Big Paul hit. And on December 16th, 1985, as Paul Castellano went to step out of his car, he and his bodyguard/driver walked into a hail of bullets. Carniglia would pump 6 bullets into Big Paul as Lino casually walked up and blasted an unsuspecting Tommy Bilotti in the back of the head until he stopped moving. And just like that, Big Paul and his underboss, Tommy Bilotti, were taken off the map forever. This was a major accomplishment for Lino, who would finally get his button from new boss, John Gotti, and as a token of respect and loyalty for helping him pull off the biggest mob hit of all time, Lino was instantly made a captain after being made, which says a lot for how Gotti viewed Lino, you know? It definitely does. Actions speak louder than words. You know, for him to be made right away and not even skip soldier, go right to captain, that's a big deal. Says a lot. You know, he was a rare breed of being an earner and a feared hitter. He was a very charismatic and influential guy. Lino also had his hands into a lot of different rackets for the Gambino crime family. Including, obviously, drugs, heroin being the big one, loan sharking, a few different drywall companies. He also had he was also involved with skimming money from school bus companies in the New York area, which was said to be very lucrative. Then, on August 29th, 1988, John Gotti would turn to his most trusted hitter once again. Eddie Lino would be tasked with taking out John Gotti's old pal turned rat, Willie Boy Johnson, who was outed by a frustrated prosecutor in one of the many Gotti trials during the mid to late 80s. Eddie Lino, being a slick and clever hitman, would farm the hit out to a fellow Mad Hatter in the Bonanno crime family, his good pal Tommy Karate Patera, who was a savage with a gun in his hand. And Lino knew the hit would have to come from someone outside the Gambino crime family, given the feds' serious hard-on for John Gotti Sr., and anyone close to him or tied in with him. So, on August 29th, 1988, 3 years after being outed as an FBI informant, Tommy Karate and Vincent Kojak Giattino would lay in wait in a half-built home that was on Willie Boy Johnson's route to work, which he would walk to his construction job every morning. And ultimately, he would be ambushed by the two hitmen. He was riddled with bullets, and Tommy Karate would drop Johnson and casually walk over to a crawling Willie Boy and pump 4 more into the back of his heads, ultimately finishing the job for Eddie Lino and John Gotti Sr., you know, with class, if I must say, you know. But given the fact that Lino was such a loyal and close ally and confidant of John Gotti, you know, as a result of that, Lino would have big problems down the line. And in 1990, Gotti, Gravano, and Locascio of the Gambino administration were taking off the street. And as you well know, anyone close to John Gotti Sr. or his son was vulnerable for attack from Gotti's enemies and the FBI, ultimately. You know, Eddie Lino would have got the same sentence as Gene Gotti and John Carniglia, which was 50 years. He would have got smoked. Because, you know, he was indicted along with them in that Bergen drug case. However, it would be the Lucchese crime family, Gaspipe specifically, who would send all-time crooked cops Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito to do his dirty work. Lino was so slick and feared, fucking Casso had to send 2 dirty cops, you know, to do his bidding, you know what I mean? You know, and on November 6th, 1991, Eddie Lino would be pulled over while driving on the Belt Parkway and was accosted by the 2 hitmen with badges. You know, little did he know. And as Eppolito asked Lino for his license and registration, he would oblige and go to reach over into the glove box to fetch those items. And a sneaky, silent Caracappa would reach over and pump 9 rounds into an unsuspecting Lino, leaving him for dead, slumped over in his car. And it would be over a decade, essentially, before the two dirty cops would be brought to justice. You know, but they both would get life sentences down the road, and ultimately die alone and afraid in jail, prison for that matter, you know. A very sad ending for Eddie Leno, you know, but his name still rings bells on the streets of Brooklyn to this day, you know. There's a lot of them too. There's a lot of them Lenos inside and outside the mafia. But, you know, all good things come to an end. This has been another episode of Epic Gangsta Tales. I want to thank you guys for rocking with me. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. And please, if you're rocking with the channel like I know you are, please like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe, guys. Please, it makes a huge difference, and it just helps the channel grow that much more. You know, essentially, I'd like to take this to the point where I can do lives, we can be more interactive and stuff like that. But, you know, YouTube doesn't make things easy sometimes. So thank you guys for rocking with me. Please keep checking out the videos, show support, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.